Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto is son of Angel? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Silver Writing Bug for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. I always knew I was different. It was never ever how the other little kids felt. You know, I'm invincible. I'm so much better than you. And stuff like that. No, I was way past those kinds of childish fantasies at a very early age. My life was one filled with hardships, troubles, and I could never have survived as long as I did, still clinging to something as foolish as that. At first, I was confused why no one else saw the way I did. Didn't they know what it was like to go hungry? Why were they so confused when I told them how hard it was to get a decent place to sleep at night? I had always been forced to learn quickly or die, and soon discovered that they actually had homes, that they had soft beds to sleep in at night, that they had good food to eat every day. To me, it sounded like they were spoiled. However, I learned that this was the norm for most kids and that I was the odd one out. I was different. Also, most kids actually enjoyed their birthdays. They didn't loathe their birthdays with the same passion I did. In fact, they even got presents. It was a time to be happy, not run away from drunken mobs, and hope you would last till morning. Thankfully, that was the only time the drunk mobs got bold enough to actually try anything, what with the Anbu that usually followed me around. Everything about this pointed to one thing. I was different. And not in a good way. So I kept my head down. Tried not to stir up too much trouble, to give people a reason to avoid me, because that was obviously what they wanted to do. Really, I had enough on my plate and I didn't need much more. Though you know there never is much rest for the martyr. I examined my appearance in the mirror. 6 odd scars showed obnoxiously on my cheeks, giving me a mischievous look that made most people label me as a troublemaker. Bright blonde hair, paired with unnatural blue eyes that would make anyone stand out in any crowd. Oh yes, I didn't need anything to make me any more noticeable than I already was. I knew Lady Luck was cackling madly at me when I turned around, exposing my bare back to the mirror. Exposing the 2 hawk-like wings folded gracefully on my back. Yes, just my luck. I, Uzumaki Naruto, am an angel. It happened when I was born. You know the story, and I sure don't want to have to explain it again. The Kyuubi attacked, badass Yondaime sealed the 9-tailed fox into some poor kid, me, by the way, and he died. Leaving said kid, me, with a terrible burden no newborn should have to deal with. At least, that's the story everyone else knows. Technically it's true. See, there was a little problem with the sealing. When I was born, I wasn't exactly the strongest child. In fact, I should have been in the hospital and most likely would have stayed there for weeks before I was even allowed out. However, the Yondaime had no other choice and just hoped for the best. The best wasn't enough. It was obvious I would not last the sealing. However, the Shinigami gave its word to the Yondaime, and a Shinigami never goes back on its word. If I died, the Kyuubi would be let back out and then it'd be back to square one. The Shinigami could heal, of course, but a normal human, especially a child, would never be able to take the Shinigami's power. So the Shinigami made me into something he could save. An angel. Of course, the Shinigami knew that it would be a little problematic if he brought back a child to the underworld, so he devised a plan that allowed me to get the full angel attributes in stages. The first stage was the easiest, or perhaps the hardest, learning exactly what I was. It first happened when I was 6. I quickly peeked out from behind the building, feeling semi-exposed. I cursed my bad luck. To be caught outside, alone, at night, especially today. Hadn't I learned my lesson the first time this had happened? I knew I could worry about my stupidity later, but for now I had to focus on simply getting home without getting the attention of all the drunks in the bar. Why did the bar have to be on the only street that didn't have any other escape routes? Come on. I muttered to myself. Just run, real quick, they won't notice you. As experienced as I was for a child, it still didn't change the fact that I was a child. A stupid, snotty, loud-mouthed little child. I whipped around the building and ran in a dead sprint, trying to be so quick they wouldn't notice me. Unfortunately, some of them were ninja, and they're especially dangerous when they're drunk. They don't have any self-control. They don't have a problem with beating up a defenseless little kid or the brain to think of the consequences if they did. Where do you think you're going, little brat? I heard a shout and felt rather than saw the kunai that embedded itself into my foot. Curse my lack of shoes. I shrieked with pain as the kunai did what it was supposed to do, hold me in place so I couldn't run. Then I realized the one who had thrown the kunai and his Chronaius were all advancing on me. Gritting my teeth, I yanked the kunai out and tossed it aside, not wasting a moment before I took off again. However, the wound in my foot got in the way. All I could manage was a slow, limping run. When I heard the people behind me laughing, I knew they were just playing with me. I took an alley to the left, hoping that none of the drunks knew the backstreets of Konoha like I did. My prayers were answered because I couldn't hear the shouts anymore. Weaving a bit more just to make sure I'd lost them, I finally arrived at the back door of the apartment building. And that was when all hell broke loose. Now I know that they were just giving me false hope until the last moment, making me believe that I had actually escaped unscathed. My child self hadn't known that, so preoccupied with escaping. The ploy had worked and I had had to deal with the consequences. It was all a blur, and I can't quite remember it all. A kick coming towards my face, raising a hand to block it, feeling blows over the rest of my body, not quite sure where it was coming from, spitting blood, feel the world darken. The last thing I remember was a burst of golden light and someone screaming. The hell are we supposed to do? Shrimp nearly gets himself killed. David. Watch your language. Why do we have to be the ones to take care of him? I swear, Gigi is so soft-hearted sometimes. Don't you remember? He gave his word. Don't insult Shinigami-sama like that. You just worship him because he's your father, and if he disappears you'll be the new Shinigami. David, I would never. NNN. Both the voices froze abruptly. Is he awake? Now look what you've done. Your shouting woke him up. My shouting. You're the one who was ragging on me, Mary, and I swear to God I will. David Inasago. You little rat. You're a disgrace of an angel. Shut up, I had quietly, not quite able to take their shouting any longer. See? He wants you to shut up. He didn't specify which one of us. I'll bet it was you, David, you nasty, evil little delinquent. The reason you got assigned to him was because you're on community service. If you hadn't given that fountain of youth to the mortal you wouldn't be in this mess. Quiet. I roared, shooting up furiously. Can't you two ever shut up? You're giving me a migraine. See? It was both of you. I'm starting to like this kid. Shut up, Ezekiel. I was greeted by the sight of 3 people, each dressed in the same glaring white color with gold accents. However, each outfit had some small differences. The one called David wore a white hood and his sleeves were cut jaggedly up to his shoulders. He wore black boots, which had gold spangles. The only woman of the group, the one called Mary, wore her dress simply and elegantly, everything cut cleanly and no ragged edges. Her dress was long and flowing and had only one sleeve, which displayed her porcelain skin and elegant shoulders. The final man, Ezekiel, wore his clothing simply and without embellishments. However, I actually favored his clothing the most because it didn't hurt my eyes to look at. They were all gorgeous. David had almost white blonde hair and electric blue eyes, which had a mischievous sparkle in them. He had powerful, muscled arms and a bright white smile that seemed to light up the room. Everything about him screamed, rebel. Mary had porcelain skin, and everything she did had elegance and grace in it. Her bronze hair was twisted up into a simple bun on the back of her head, and I was slightly shocked to see 2 quizzical golden eyes staring out at me. Ezekiel was probably the most interesting person I'd ever seen. He had black curly hair that turned his head into a mop and 2 lazy purple eyes that looked extremely sleepy. He had the same deathly white skin as the other 2. The most interesting thing about them, however, was probably the giant wings on their backs. David's wings were white, though they had a subtle but unmistakable golden tinge. They were enormous compared to him. Now I noticed that he was significantly shorter than the other 2 and twitched every once in a while, almost demonstrating his energy. Mary's wings were pure white, a white so pure it outshone the freshly fallen snow. The wings sat perfectly still, almost politely. Ezekiel's wings were the most interesting wings out of all of them. They were pure black, with a gentle silver sheen surrounding them. His wings were the biggest, even bigger than David's. They framed him mysteriously and always seemed to be moving, but not like the seemingly random movement of David's wings. The movements were precise and subtle. Ezekiel noticed me staring at his wings and extended one almost lazily so I could get a better look. I had to admit he were the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. Show and tells over Zeke. I want to get this done with. It was David who grinned at my stunned look. Show some respect to Ezekiel, David. Really, Mary, it's fine. No, Ezekiel, it's not fine. This delinquent. She gave me the puppy dog look. You couldn't resist that look. Well, maybe Ezekiel, since he's. Another word and you'll know why I'm the right-hand man of Shinigami-sama. Who are you? Why are you here? Who sent you? I interrupted, tired of their ceaseless bickering. I'm sure you already know who we are. Ezekiel rumbled. It's what we are is the question. We're angels. Mary cut in. I blinked. Angels. Like people with wings. Immortal. Stuff like that. Yes, I suppose, if that's what you would describe us as. We also happen to be Shinigami-sama's workers. We do the errands that Shinigami-sama is too lazy too busy to do. Ezekiel quickly corrected his slip-up and David snickered into his hand. Oh, so am I dead? I asked bluntly. After all, what else would they be here for? No, Naruto-kun. Look behind you. I turned my head slowly and gasped at what I saw. It looked so out of place, I had to reach out and touch them to make sure they were there. I had wings. I had wings. How? I stuttered, watching the two hawk-like wings with shock. You don't physically have them right now, anyway. Uzumaki Naruto, you are an angel. That's when my brain went into overload and I fainted. Well, he took it better than I thought he would. Mary remarked, watching as I slowly woke back up. How can you just accuse someone of being an angel? I groaned, slowly rising to my feet. I'm not accusing you, I'm telling you that you're an angel. Ezekiel corrected. You're insane. Angels are immortal and loved and, beautiful and stuff like that. There's no way I'm an angel. Ezekiel and Mary exchanged a look and David just frowned deeply. Don't sell yourself short, kid. David was the one who said this, surprisingly. His voice was soft and his eyes were clear and almost understanding. They were perhaps the nicest eyes I'd ever seen. When the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi into you, Naruto. Mary was interrupted by my choking noise. What? Oh, you don't know. David shrugged. See, no mere mortal can kill the Kyuubi, though the Yondaime could give him a run for his money, so he sealed the Kyuubi into a child. That child was you. Wah? I managed to get out, feeling the world closing in around me. He needed a little shrimp, so the chakra coils could adapt to Kyuubi's potent chakra. You were available, I guess. David finished his explanation. Anyway, you were real close to death and wouldn't last the sealing, so Shinigami-sama decided to heal you. However, no mere mortal can withstand Shinigami-sama's chakra, so he had to turn you into something a little more than mortal. You'll turn into an angel in stages, though, so you don't get too overwhelmed by all of this. The words that Mary was speaking were soft and far away, but I was still able to comprehend what was being said. Uzumaki Naruto, you are an angel. Was the last thing I heard before blacking out for the last time. At first, I had been disbelieving. Me, an angel. However, the angels were always there when I slept or got knocked out, and eventually I came to terms with my surprising immortality. Things started happening that hadn't happened before. I had unbeatable luck. I was, how do you put it? I looked a lot nicer than I originally did, and my blood had almost imperceptible golden flecks in it. However, with the addition of my wings, it was going to be so much harder to hide it. Life's a bitch. Yeah, right. The day before. Alright, Gaki, it's time to kick it into high gear. You got everything, right? I rolled my eyes at David. I'm not 6 years old anymore, David. Yes, I got everything. Mary frowned at me apprehensively, smoothing her already impeccable curls back and tossing her head thoughtfully. She hadn't changed at all in the span of 6 years, in fact, none of them had changed at all. I was the only one who had. Naruto, this is a very important day. If you pass the Genin test, you're going to be forced into the next stage, whether you're ready for it or not. We don't know what's going to happen, so we need to be prepared for anything. Ezekiel nodded seriously, purple eyes taking me in coolly. Mary is right, and so is David, believe it or not. We don't know if you'll gain something sublime mortality or heightened senses, or something very obvious, like the wings or well, Ezekiel smirked. Spoilers. As I cursed Ezekiel's name for his nasty secret keeping, Mary caught my attention with a snap of her fingers. If you're getting your wings, you'll know it. You'll have a few hours to prepare if you know you're getting them, so it should be enough for you to hide somewhere safe. You'll be a little vulnerable during that period of time, I'm afraid. Mary began pacing, loose dress trailing behind her. If you get immortality, it will be a little harder to tell. You can't exactly go off killing yourself, and you would blow or cover if you went picking a suicide fight. Let's hope either Kyuubi or we will know. Now heightened senses, Mary frowned, that will probably be the toughest. At least you can hide your wings, but heightened sense will be tougher to hide over a longer period of time. Also, most likely the sights and sounds will overwhelm you, so you'll probably need a little while to adjust. I shrugged, rolling my shoulders to loosen them up. I'll get what I get, Mary. Besides, I have you guys. What could possibly go wrong? David grinned mischievously. Famous last words, Gaki. Once again I had to roll my eyes at him. Naruto, we want you to know that even if you fail today, we're still very proud of you. Ezekiel smiled softly, trying to placate me. He could always tell what I was feeling at the moment, not matter how hard I tried to hide it. At that moment, the nervousness was probably rolling off me in waves. His words helped, just a little. Of course, Naruto. You've been trained by heavenly beings. You're one of the best. Now that was exaggerating a little, but I really needed a strong pick-me-upper. Yeah. I'm the best of the best. No one can beat me. Mary sighed and frowned deeper. David, what have I told you about putting stupid ideas in his head like that? Ah, come on, you old bat, you know he doesn't really believe it. Old bat. Old bat. I'm not much older than you traitorous little creep. Traitorous little creep. I didn't do anything. All that little mortal whelp had to do was bat her eyelashes to get you to give her one of the greatest treasures of the mortal world. Aw come on, the fountain of youth isn't halfway across the universe, we could always get some more. David, you little being. Oh, looky there. I chirped, happy for the distraction. Once you got those two started they'd never shut up. It's my alarm clock. Time for school. Bye. Mary and David barely glanced up, saying bye unanimously, and Ezekiel glared up at me. He was obviously displeased I was leaving him to deal with the two lovebirds. I mock saluted him before disappearing on the spot. God damn it, stop it, I muttered, throwing out a lazy fist in hope of hitting the off button. Being. My eyes flashed open, catching the alarm clock in a deadly glare. It continued to ring, innocently blinking the time to me. I innocently smashed my fist down onto, effectively shattering the thing to little bits. Injit wailed mournfully. I chucked it out the window. That was the second one this week. It's getting ridiculous. If you don't stop I'll force my chakra into your coils and rupture them. I shivered, knowing the Kyuubi was not threatening me, he was telling me he'd rupture my chakra coils. He'd actually do it. And he won't have to worry about interrupting my training, my coils would painfully heal themselves in a few hours. Yeah, you say that every time, Kyu-chan. I retorted, knowing I was pushing the safely tease Kyuubi line. Brah. I'll kill that brat. That son of a bitch angel freak with the superiority complex. Ah, I should have known. David and Kyuubi have a history, apparently. David told us that he called Kyuubi Kyu-chan, and, well, it just sort of stick. Though how David is able to casually call Kyuubi Kyu-chan and still get away with it is beyond me. Tuning Kyuubi out, I began to check and see if I really did have everything. Kunai pouch, check. Seals and tags, check. Supplies, check. Trusty goggles, check. Clothes, check. Funky assortment of random pranks items and gadgets. Check and check. Alright. Looks like I'm all prepared and stuff. I fingered my goggles, really hoping it would be the last time I ever felt them on my face. After all, 3 years was a long time to wear them, but I'd promised to myself that I would wear these goddamn goggles until I passed the academy. I'd take them off at the next stage, and oh. That's right, the next stage. In truth, it was something that scared me even more than the academy tests. I didn't know what would happen, didn't know how things would play out. Would I get my wings? Immortality. I know everyone else would think, oh, cool. Wings. Immortality. But that's not what I think. I know that as soon as the next stage passes, I'll be a little more than human. A little farther from normal, as if I wasn't far enough away. And when someone finds out everything, how not normal I am, how unlike them, and when they all turn away for good, think it might kill me. I'm thinking way too hard about this. Waving goodbye to the plant in the corner and saluting the Raymond in the cupboard, I leapt out the window and onto the roof, making my way towards the academy. Showtime. Imino Iruka stood at the front of the class, calling out names. Aburam. Shino nodded his head, dark glasses glinting. Akamichi. Taoji raised one hand, other hand buried deep in his chip bag. Aoki. The nondescript side character raised his hand for the sake of the story. Fujita. Another nondescript side character. Godo. See above. Haruno. Sakura raised one slim arm, tilting her head as discreetly, read. Obviously, as she could to keep Sasuke in her sights. Peigawa. He's sick again, sensei. Kiba shouted out from the crowd, looking extremely smug. Hyuga. Anada's pale eyes darted around to see if anyone was watching, before raising a trembling, slim hand. I don't even need to ask about you, Kiba Iruka muttered, ignoring the boy's indignant cry. His eyes traveled to the next name. Mori. Here, Iruka-sensei. A little girl, yet another nondescript side character, waved her hand wildly to catch Iruka's attention. Yes, there you are, the teacher muttered. Nara. There was a long pause. Nara Shikamaru. He's here, sensei. Chaoji said, nudging his best friend's sleeping form. Just sleeping. Shikamaru grunted and shifted a bit in his sleep. Suzuki. No one answered and looked towards the empty chair. Has anyone seen Suzuki today? Iruka asked, glancing around at the kids' faces. No. Well, we'll catch him later. Ichiha. Sasuke raised his hand coolly, though the only hint Iruka needed was the swooning of many Sasuke fangirls. Alright. Uzumaki. A few of the kids snickered, obviously amused by the fact that I was missing class. I was, after all, the dead last in the Kyuubi container. People always found it funny when I got hurt or into trouble. Naruto. Does anyone know where that boy is? Probably skipping class again, sensei. Kiba called out. Iruka clenched his fist, face slowly reddening. He promised he wouldn't skip any more classes, too. Wait till I get my hands on him. Hey. And that was where I made my entrance. Naruto. Iruka shouted, a pissed off expression adorning his face. Sorry, sensei. Just doing a last-minute project before I graduate. I grinned and rubbed the back of my neck like I usually do when I'm nervous. Yeah, last minute. I just committed the riskiest prank I've ever done. I actually plan things before I do them, thank you very much. What kind of last-minute project? Oops. He wasn't fooled. Last-minute project kind of stuff. When in doubt, play stupid. Well, I suppose I can't force it out of you, so just sit down. Iruka visibly deflated, looking defeated. Heh. Looks like my awesomeness was too much for him to handle. I did not just think that. I shook my head angrily, trying to bash those kinds of thoughts out of my head on the desk. Kyuubi and Mary had been so mad at me when those thoughts started coming and had taken it upon themselves to beat the truth into me, meaning they verbally assaulted me and told me that I was still a weak loser that couldn't handle the real world. It had taken a while for me to get it, but eventually the message got in. There is always someone better than you. I wasn't better than Sasuke or Iruka or the old man or Kyuubi, or so I needed to work harder. I'm glad you're finally learning, kid. Speak of the devil. The damned fox just had to step in. While I had my inner monologue going, Iruka had been finishing up the roll call. He quietly rolled up the list, put it on his immaculately neat desk, and strode crisply to the front of the room. Today is the Genin exams, where you will be tested whether or not you're ready for the shinobi world. Iruka paused, making sure everyone was paying attention to him before continuing. In the shinobi world, it was about when I tuned him out, praying to God that he'd make this quick. Inner Calmander. Suddenly, in my closed eyes the picture of Ezekiel popped up. Knowing better than to freak out and open my eyes, I stopped to regain my composure, before asking in my mind, Ezekiel, what are you doing here? Naruto, there's something I should tell you. Ezekiel looked at the ground carefully. There's some business I need to take care of, so you might not see me for a while. I was extremely confused. What do you mean, Ezekiel? You've taken business trips before, why is this any different? Naruto, I might not be coming back. Ever. As in, Ezekiel made a cutting motion to his neck. I gasped out loud. Ezekiel, what do you mean? Where are you going? I don't have much time, but there's one thing I can tell you. Darkness is rising, and they need me to help stop it. You should be safe with Mary and David, but if you ever find someone like us, don't trust them. Never trust them. They need my help with the war. But that, Ezekiel was gone. Naruto. I felt a piece of chalk contact my forehead, leaving a big white mark. Dazed, I blinked up at my teacher. He looked slightly relieved, though it quickly morphed into anger. Pay attention, or you'll never pass. Shaking his head and giving me a half-hearted glare, he continued with his ultra-boring speech. Thankfully, my spacing had given him incentive to finish quicker. If you pass, you'll be placed in 3-man cell teams. Each team will do D-rank missions at first, but then you will slowly move up to C-rank missions, and perhaps higher. Any questions? No one looked willing to prod the subject. Iruka nodded in satisfaction. Giving me the "we'll talk about this later" look, he walked quickly to the door to the back room, calling out, Aburam, before slipping inside. Hey, what were you doing, dead last? Trying to put on your clothes in the morning without help from your mommy? This earned a rough laugh from Kiba and a bark from Akimaru. Feh. Idiots. Laughing at their own jokes. I growled angrily, wanting nothing more than to jump across the table and strangle Kiba. Of course, Sasuke had to put in his 2 cents. Dog breath is right for once, dope. I turned and snarled angrily at Sasuke, my temper flying out of check. As if you blockheads could comprehend the enormity of what I was doing. Then I blinked and blushed. Oops. I just had to pull out the big words. Kyuubi, Ezekiel and sometimes even David like to try and impress each other with the use of enormous words. I joined the game. It's affecting me even now. Sasuke and Kiba blinked in surprise, obviously stunned by my flippant use of complex words. Kiba's mouth even dropped open. I laughed, his eyes widening to the size of miniature saucers. He was probably worried that his, sort of, partner in crime had grown a brain. Oh yeah, Kiba. Comprehend that. The hell, Naruto. For a second there, you sounded all you know smart. Kiba literally shivered at the thought. Hey, I can be smart when I want to be. I snapped back, a little disappointed that Kiba doubted me so much. Yeah, right. That was just a fluke, dope. Probably doesn't even know what the words mean. Sasuke smirked smugly, thinking he had me pegged. Closing my eyes and slowly opening them again, I counted to 3 in my head to keep myself from blowing up at them. As much as I'd like to stun them all to hell with my impressive vocabulary, I knew the intelligence was just a side effect of me being an angel. I figured that I would slowly introduce them to the thought of me being an intelligent life form instead of being mushy-brained. It wasn't working as well as I'd liked, but what can you do? Ichiha. I blinked in surprise. That time already? I hadn't expected it to go so quickly. As Sasuke walked proudly down the steps, the girl swooned on either side of him, screaming his name. Who would fall in love with an icebox like him? He doesn't have personality. Shino has more personality than that guy. After Perfect Team Sasuke came out of the testing room, a hit I8 clutched in one hand, I drummed my fingers nervously on the desk, knowing my fate was in that room. Come on, he growled inwardly. I can do this. But what if I can't? What if Mary and Kyuubi were right, that I was useless? That I couldn't do anything? No, I couldn't doubt myself. If I started to doubt myself, it would mean I was giving up. It suddenly felt really lonely without Ezekiel's reassuring, supporting hand on my back. He was going off to fight a war and might never come back, my friend, my family. I might even go far enough to say he was the father I never had. He was gone, during one of the most important times of my life. Was that him saying he'd given up on me? Uzumaki. Sensei called. I shivered, gulped, and took a step towards my destiny. I stood nervously in front of my senseis, trying to pour all of my nervousness into my eyes, which were staring at the floor. They were quiet, perhaps contemplating my silent, still figure to gauge my skill level. Finally, I glanced up. On the left, Iruka-sensei, familiar and almost family, I guess. On the right, Mizuki-sensei, unfamiliar and cold. I'd always felt he had bad intentions about him. There was something about his sickly sweet kindness that had always put me on edge. Usually I'm a pretty good judge of character, sometimes I think it's another side effect of being an angel and all, but I really hope it isn't. Just another thing to set me apart from the rest of my peers. Hello Naruto. Let's get started. Apparently they were finished with their scan. The first part was the normal mumbo jumbo, throw the kunai at the target, some stealth info, normal stuff that normal ninja know. It was easy for me, what with Ezekiel's tutoring sessions after the academy was over for the day, since some of the teachers tried to sabotage me. He helped me understand, and then some. Inwardly, I contemplated our little makeshift family. David was my rebellious older teenage brother, Mary my perfect older teenage sister, Ezekiel the father who kept us in line, and Kyuubi, the strong, overpowerful, sadistic grandfather. Wow. Dysfunctional family. Alright, Naruto, very good. Iruka said happily, looking slightly hopeful. No matter how hard he was on me, I knew that all he wanted was the best for me, that he wanted me to pass, to succeed and go beyond even that. Last thing, Naruto. 3 Bunshin. Sensei smiled at me encouragingly, and I smiled back. Maybe I would pass. Just my luck though, that Bunshin was one of the only techniques I couldn't do. Ezekiel was baffled as to why, at first, as was Mary and David, but then Kyuubi had cut in and said that I just had too much chakra and too little control to correctly perform the technique. The angels had scrambled to teach me some chakra control techniques in time, but it wasn't working. I hadn't tried the Bunshin in favor of the other techniques, but I hoped my training had paid off. My hands flew through the hand seals, feeling them through muscle memory. Work. I begged. The chakra formed around my fingers, tingling slightly, and I guided it as best as I could, trying to get them to form the shape that I wanted. Remembered my training, what I had worked so hard at, and finished the technique. I didn't dare look, in case I'd created another mess. Let it have worked. Iruka sighed, and my heart dropped to my stomach. I'm sorry, you fail. He scratched something out on his paper, which might as well have been a big fat red X. Ah, come on Iruka. He managed to create 3 this time. Mizuki chided and my heart soared. Maybe my judge of character was wrong. Was he actually on my side? Then my eyes flickered to the clones, and I groaned. 2 of them looked like they wanted to go die in a corner, and the other was glowing a soft gold and didn't have any arms. I dispelled the failed clones quickly, hoping no one had noticed the strange glow. That was new. Mizuki, in Naruto, yo I'm sorry Naruto. I'm sorry Naruto. 3 years in a row, I'd heard that sentence. 3 times I'd failed. First dismissal. Then pity. Then sadness. That is what Iruka had felt when he said those words to me. Frustration. Confusion. Numb. What I felt when I realized I hadn't passed. Now I felt numb. I was a failure. Kyuubi was right, Mary was right, and Ezekiel had probably left because he couldn't bear to see me fail. A freak, with a demon in my stomach and not even completely human. No, not human at all. Angel. Why was the word suddenly so bitter? I swung on that swing, head pressed down by shame, embarrassment, and a whole myriad of emotions I was too tired to deal with. Why was I so affected by this? There was always next year, right? 1 more year to hide, 1 more year to practice, 1 more year to pretend I was normal. Oh god, I don't think I can do this anymore. Hey Naruto. I knew that soft, sickeningly sweet voice. It was Mizuki-sensei, silver hair not even comparing to Ezekiel's glowing sheen. None of these people compared with Ezekiel, or David, or Mary. Hey Mizuki-sensei. I muttered. Are you alright? What a stupid question. I'd just had my dream ripped out from under my fingertips for the third time in a row. How did he think I felt? I mumbled, eyes tracing a pattern into the ground. Mizuki let out a soft laugh, which immediately set me on edge. Haruka just wants what's best for you, Naruto. He doesn't mean to be so harsh. Slumping further into the swing, I muttered, Say, I know another way to pass. A secret way. I wouldn't be telling just anyone. I think you deserve to pass. I shot up in the swing, thoughts of suspicion and gut feelings of mistrust flying out the window. Pass. There was another way to pass. What do I need to do? I slipped into the Hokage tower, using absolute stealth mode, which was actually decent. Heh. Sneaking away from Anbu did that to you. Checking my surroundings to make sure no one was there, I slowly crept down the hall to where I knew all the big cool scrolls were. The old man had shown me them, once, when he actually had the time to get away from his duties. Now he mostly just spent his time holed up in his office, trying to get the paperwork done before the council started complaining. Heh. Sucks to be Hokage. A long time ago, I'd aspired to be Hokage, thinking it would give me the recognition I deserved thought I deserved. However, eventually it just sort of died, though the dream still held a special spot on my heart because honestly, I didn't want to be doing paperwork with the council on my back and stuff. Plus, I couldn't bear being Hokage if I was always lying to my people about who I was and what I had in me. Maybe if they found out whom I really was and still accepted meme, then I'd consider the dream again. But for now, it was just a childish hope from years ago. Stuck in my inner dialogue, I didn't notice when the old man snuck up on me. Naruto, he said, and I swear I jumped 3 feet in the air. What are you doing here? My eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, and out of pure panic, I resorted to the most childish jutsu in my arsenal, created in frustration when I'd been angry at Mary for some strange reason. I'd made it knowing that Mary would just blow her socks off in fury. That was the only time I'd ever gotten anything other than mild emotion from Ezekiel. Bark no jutsu. Muttering under my breath about perverts, I hadn't expected the technique to work, he was the Hokage, and no child could possibly come up with a jutsu to stun him, but to my surprise, a spurt of blood flew out of his nose and he fell to the ground in a dead faint. I scuttled down the hall, looking at the doors in an attempt to regain my bearings. Geez, seeing the old man react like that really shook me. Had no one really discovered his most obvious weakness? Finally I arrived at the door, feeling a little perturbed about how easy it was to sneak into the Hokage tower, and reached up towards the smooth wood. Then I paused, what was I thinking, just reaching up to a door with a whole load of powerful scrolls. There was probably some sort of trap, or alarm or something. Scratching the back of my head, a habit I couldn't quite seem to shake, I thought on it for a little bit, trying to process what I knew. 1. Jutsu were jealously protected secrets amongst nations too. Most of the Anbu I knew of were devious and sadistic, but could never find outlets on missions because they had to act professional. 3. This was still looking too easy. Obviously there had to be some sort of trap on that door. That's when I heard the loud clumping footsteps of a patrol. Without thinking I threw open the door and pushed inside, landing on the floor amongst the shelves of dusty old scrolls. After closing the door behind me I pressed one ear to the solid wood and tried to see if the ninja was still there. Letting out the breath I'd unconsciously been holding, I clambered back outside to deal with the problem. Heading inside the scroll vault without setting off the traps. I was literally in deep think mode for about 5 minutes before I realized what had just happened. My jaw dropped in surprise. The hell? Slowly I turned the knob on the door, blinking in shock when it opened without a problem. Really? Was that it? Wow, I really needed to talk to old man after I was finished stealing the scroll. Scooping up the scroll that read in bold letters, "Forbidden," I quickly turned around to get out of the tower. Right now I was just asking for trouble. Wait. Kit. Kyuubi shouted, and I scrambled back before the patrol crossed in the hallway. What, Kyuubi? I don't have time for this. You idiot, you're not going to get another chance like this for a while. Go back and take some of the other scrolls, too. Are you insane? I hissed. I'm only doing this because I want to pass, not because I'm a criminal. Kit, I'm pretty sure you know by now that Mizuki was lying. Kyuubi growled back, and I was silent. I knew that Mizuki was lying, but there was a small chance he wasn't. Besides, I could always claim ignorance and hold them to the fact that they'd promised to pass me if I learned a jutsu. Just do it. Kyuubi roared, and I could practically feel the rumbling in my chest. I flinched, not really wanting to do what I was about to do. Kyuubi was right, of course, I was never going to get another chance like this. Besides, would they really notice one other scroll missing? Gently running my fingers along the scrolls, I examined each scroll with care, aware of the draining luck and time. One caught my eye. History of the Angels. My breath caught in my throat. Maybe. Without thinking, I tucked the scroll into my pocket, watching with interest as the dust clouded in the air. This scroll had probably never been opened, at least not for a while. Why was it even there in the first place? Beneath that scroll was another one that looked even older and dustier. A scroll so covered in filth that I couldn't even read the title. Shrugging, I stuffed that scroll in my pocket as well, couldn't hurt now. Then I turned with my prizes weighing my arms and my pockets and left in a flash of gold and orange. You have got to be kidding me. They probably heard me back in the village with how loud I shouted, but at this point I didn't really care. Who in nine hells would put a stupid technique like the Bunchen and Forbidden Scroll? Skimming the lines to see if I had missed anything, I blinked in surprise and hope. Two might actually be able to do this one. Near the bottom, the little fine print had stated that making too many would result in chakra exhaustion. Now that sounded like my kind of Bunchen. Page Bunchen. There was a loud poof, and next to me appeared a sickly little Naruto clone. It was pale, it was weak looking, but it was still better than all my other attempts. At my loud cheer, the clone smiled weakly before poofing into smoke. Wait a minute. Did it just smile at me? A clone? Well, the scroll did say they were supposed to be solid, but emotions. Now that was new. I rolled my shoulders before going into another attempt. Cage Bunchen. Only one clone appeared this time as well, though it was in better shape. It had my healthy tan and didn't look like a puff of wind would knock it over. Hey, look at that. I took a step back. Talking to. I'm real. Solid and stuff. This is so cool. Then it abruptly disappeared after it leapt into the air and landed hard on the ground. I grinned widely, suddenly able to see all the possibilities with this jutsu. Supposedly the clones were supposed to stand up to quite a bit more than landing hard, and when they did training, pranking, everything. The possibilities were endless. Naruto. What do you think you're doing? Knowing the storm that was about to come, I unconsciously rubbed the back of my head and leaned tiredly on the scroll. Now I could confirm my suspicions about Mizuki. Hey, sensei. Are you here to pass me? I grinned widely, showing off my sharp canines. Naruto, you? What do you mean? Iruka was immediately on guard. I knew it. Mizuki, that traitorous bastard. Well, Mizuki-sensei. Iruka sucked in a soft breath at the mention of Mizuki's name. Told me that if I learned a technique from the scroll I could pass. Iruka was stone quiet for a few minutes, staring at me with wide eyes, trying to check and see if I was lying. Apparently he decided that I wasn't because he slowly closed his eyes and let out that breath he'd been holding. That's when Iruka turned around and dodged a kunai that had been aimed at him, landing in a crouch next to me. Looking towards where the weapons came from, I hissed out a single word as I spotted a flash of silver in the trees. Mizuki. The traitor landed on a tree branch in front of us, looking incredibly smug with himself. His mouth was distorted into a wide condescending smirk as he took in the grim student and the angry teacher. Hello there, Naruto. You can give me the scroll now. And you couldn't have done it yourself. I scoffed inwardly, remembering the lack security. Naruto, don't give him the scroll. Iruka shook his head, disgusted, and addressed Mizuki. How low of you, using innocent children to do your dirty work. Mizuki ignored Iruka, instead focusing in on me. Naruto, let me tell you about a little law about you. No way. You're kidding me. Years ago, the Yondaime sealed Takayubi into a child. That child was you. You are the Kyuubi. Cue evil laughter. I'm not exactly sure how to react to this, so I just frown and decide to mull over my decision later. Putting my hands in the now familiar cross wheel and ignoring Mizuki's expectant face, I called out, Tajuu Cage Bunchen. Immediately the expectant face morphed into shock. What? I tilted my head sideways. I'm kind of not sure how to react to this since I already know about Kyuubi. I'll get back to you about it later. Charge. I shouted the last part, raising my hand in sync with the rest of the clones, well over 1,000. I was a genin, he was a chunin, however 1,000 genin top chunin every time. Mizuki was lost under the many-me's, screaming bloody murder. Ha. Take that, traitorous bastard. When we finished, I turned back to Iruka, who was frozen in shock at either A, me knowing about Kyuubi and or B churning out over 1,000 shadow clones. Heh. Maybe I went a bit overboard. I let out a loud laugh. Iruka smiled, and I almost certainly knew what was coming next. Great. Panicked, I reached out and started to drag my sensei along. Let's get Raymond. You're paying. He chuckled, allowing himself to be pulled by my apparent exuberance. Calm down, calm down. The Raymond shop isn't going anywhere. Letting out a loud fakey laugh, I pulled him all the way to Ichiraku's Raymond shop. As much as I wanted this winter to pass, so bad but I just couldn't help it. I didn't want to change, it was such a scary thought. Hey, old man. I shouted loudly at Tucci, who laughed at me. Naruto. My favorite customer. The usual. I nodded, the fears flying away from me with the promise of ramen. As much as they tried to stop me, as much as they insisted I needed proper nutrition, ramen was still my escape, practically my nirvana. Kyuubi hated it, Ezekiel hated it, Mary hated it, David just laughed, but still I would never leave it. Ramen. Slurping down some noodles, I kept one cautious eye on Iruka, in case he decided to spring the news on me while I was eating. I sure hope not. I still wasn't ready for it. We ate in silence, a mostly comfortable silence, slurping the only thing being heard. Slurp, slurp. I felt slightly awkward, Iruka sitting next to me, turning every few seconds to open his mouth, as though he was going to speak before snapping it shut again. Again, and I felt it beginning to grate on my nerves. Finally I tipped back the rest of the flavorful broth and sat back with a satisfied sigh. Iruka did that thing with his mouth again, snapping it open and shut again, before turning back to his ramen. Naruto. I turned slowly. Yes, Iruka-sensei. Close your eyes. He said, smiling softly at me. Yumake, Iruka-sensei. I tried to sound as weirded out as I could and reluctantly shut my eyes. There was a rustling of cloth and I felt a warm weight settle on my forehead. I knew what it was before I even opened my eyes. Congratulations, Naruto, you passed the Genin exams. I ran. At first nothing had happened when Iruka-sensei had told me that I had passed, so I'd been a little confused but a lot happy. So happy, in fact, that I was gracious enough to let him buy another bowl of ramen for me. It had been good and full of warm spices, and all had been right in the world. I felt as though I'd dodged another bullet. Not so much, apparently. The energy drain hadn't been all that noticeable at first, so it wasn't until I'd been laughing really hard at something Iruka said did I feel it. Feel the energy going and settling in my back. At that moment, I'd known what was happening. After bidding Iruka a hasty goodbye, I'd have to apologize for such an abrupt depart. Poor guy was probably confused that he'd done something wrong. I pelted down the streets, ignoring the glares that followed me around. All I was focusing on was the fact that every moment it was getting a little harder to run, a little harder to put one foot in front of the other, and all the energy was flowing to my back, pulsing. Taking Chappé stared blearily at the apartment door for a moment, wondering when I'd gotten there before fumbling with the keys and stumbling inside. So Toretti whimpered in my head. It was Kyuubi's fault, I suppose. I'd never gotten tired before, let alone completely exhausted, so I wasn't used to the effects. How do normal people usually do this? Sleep. Yeah, that was it. I flopped onto the bed, rolling onto my stomach and propping my head on the pillow. I'd slept like this for the whole of my life, though my companions found it strange. Swiftly shutting my eyes, I waited for sleep to come. And waited. And waited. And gah. Why was falling asleep so hard tonight? It's because your mind is too active right now, Kit. Kyuubi interjected, sounding smug. Stop panicking. Panicking? I'm not panicking, Kyu-chan. Why would I be panicking? Okay, so it did sound a little like I was panicking, even in my head. Fine, damn it, you win. So I'm panicking. You would too. You don't have wings growing out of your back and draining all of your energy. That I don't, Kit, that I don't. Kyuubi sounded even smugger than before. I hate you. Kyuubi let out a low, rolling laugh as I shuddered, feeling my chakra beginning to ebb as well. How much energy did it take to make these things? It takes a lot of energy, especially for a half-human. You might even have to start tapping into my chakra, Kit. Never in my life had I been so tired, and I knew why Mary said I'd be a little vulnerable. I probably couldn't face a civilian, let alone a genin. Actually, my chances up against a civilian were looking pretty bad as well. Civilians, my mind snapped into overdrive. Loud pounding on the Naruto day was my birthday, or when the Kyuubi Adeketi sat, huddled under my covers, wishing desperately that they wouldn't break in. Let us in, Kyuubi brat. I let out a soft whimper, wanting to be anywhere but right here. You deserve to die, demon. That was when the door broke down. It was the second worst beating I ever got. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the wall, petrified by the thought that I was helpless, and someone could just walk in and kill me like they tried before. It may have been hours, it may have only been a few minutes, but I knew that I wasn't going to get sleep anytime soon, not with me reliving my nightmares and panicking even more than I originally was. In, out. In, out. Remember to breath. In, out, and out. Finally, I felt the energy drain stop, leaving me feeling weak and still a little helpless. At least it had stopped pulling on my reserves. Shakily I sat up, pushing against the wall in an attempt to steady myself. Not quite sure I wanted to see, I avoided looking behind me and stumbled into the kitchen, because I was Huyuangrai. You know, growing a pair of wings is very tiring work and requires food afterwards to help regain energy, just another excuse to eat my ramen. That's when I noticed the room was a little brighter before, though the light wasn't on. What's up with that? I wondered, before shrugging. I did a double take when I realized all the light was coming from a central point me back. Well, crap. Going to be a lot harder to hide them if they flippin' glow. Did I really want to see? Yeah, I think I'm ready. I looked cautiously over my shoulder, hesitating before squinting my eyes to look through the bright light that seemed to be coming off the wings. It took a few minutes for my eyes to adjust to the bright light, but when they did, my eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. You know, it's not every day you see two enormous wings growing out of your back, even if you did expect them. They were a strange coppery color with brown, wide and tannish streaks running down the feathers. The shape was perhaps a little hawk-like, more so than Mary, David and Ezekiel's, whose wings you just knew weren't normal or even abnormal. They were heavenly. Angel-like. Anyway, their wings didn't look like my wings actually, my wings didn't exactly look like a hawk's wings either. They were somewhere in between, abnormal, strange, and he supposed they were perfectly me, since I was strangely a half-human, half-angel needed weird wings, I guess. I attempted to move the glowing wings, but they just sort of hang there, more like weighty, vibrant accessories than moving limbs. Perhaps something had gone wrong with the creation. Had I done something that I wasn't supposed to do? Not that I knew of. I pushed harder, trying to reach out, and I was about to give up when a twinge. Nothing that would set me off, but the twinge grew, and even when I backed off it kept growing. A loud crack filled the room, and a pain ran through me that was so excruciating my vision darkened, and my mouth opened into a silent scream. There was a bright flash of light, and I found myself falling down, into the blackness. Of course he just had to get his wings. Not something a little less noticeable. Great, right when Ezekiel decides to leave for war. I frowned slightly, listening to Mary shout. Mary, you need to calm down. It's bad up there, you know it. Shinigami-sama is really powerful and all, but he can't control every district. He needs Zeke to back him up. Avid voice of reason. Since when had that happened? But sorry. I keep forgetting you were the past right-hand man. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be an insult or not. Wow, David, you were Shinigami-sama's right-hand man. I couldn't help but pipe up. A long time ago, Ezekiel had mentioned that the right-hand man of the Shinigami was switched off every 1,000 years or earlier if they betrayed the angels. However, I'd never considered the possibility of David being the right-hand man. Though Mary was the daughter of the Shinigami, so anything was possible. Ooh, kid. During 0 AD, wasn't it? David said unsurely, addressing Mary, who nodded. That's so cool. I chirped, problems forgotten. Were you one of the best? Mary snorted loudly and David's face turned slightly pink. Ah, that answered my question. So what am I doing here? I asked finally, knowing that if I was silent any longer the two would start bickering again. I think it's because you just completed the second stage. Mary shrugged, looking towards where Ezekiel usually sat before frowning and looking away. What was that right before I passed out? I tried to move the wings, but… David grimaced. I don't think the wings were fully connected. I think that the nerves weren't fully together, and when you force them to connect really quickly, that might have done something to cause it. You know, we're probably going to have to give him flying lessons now. Mary pointed out, which made David's mouth twist. I wish Zeke was here. He was always better about teaching little brats. As I opened my mouth to protest, there was a loud banging that seemed to reverberate around the white space, and I was pulled out of the mindscape so fast I got a bit of mental whiplash. My eyes snapped open, trying to see what had caused me to be pulled out so fast, and then I spotted it. The door was caved in, like someone had slammed against it but couldn't quite get in. I gasped as whatever had banged against my door did it again, nearly snapping it in half. Now usually, I would be out yelling at whoever decided to use my door as target practice, but some instinct that I usually buried reared its head and told me to get the hell out of there. There was something on the other side of that door that wasn't friendly, and dare I say it not even human. Hugging on my jacket to make sure it was secure around my wings as I went, I slowly inched towards the window, hoping to get there before it broke through the door. Just as I was a foot from the window, the door finally gave and slammed against the far wall. I stared in horror at what was on the other side, before whipping around and jumping out the window and onto the building across from mine, not stopping until I'd reached the academy. Whatever that thing was hadn't followed me, but I could tell it wasn't finished with me yet. Shuddering, I remembered what Ezekiel said. If you ever find someone like us, don't trust them. Never trust them. On the other side of that door had been a tall, black-winged, red-eyed angel. Hey, Naruto, this class is for those who passed. Shikamaru said, looking up at me with lazy black eyes. Then he seemed to notice how unsettled I was, as I'd been mildly paranoid of every person and inconspicuous hiding place in the room. Are you feeling okay? I snapped out of my frantic room scan and forced a small smile onto my face, though I was pretty sure Shikamaru didn't believe it. Ooh, just a little freaked out by something. And anyway, I did pass. What do you call this? I pointed one finger at my hit I ate. After a moment I heard Shikamaru's soft, troublesome. Before he went back to sleeping on the desk. Shut up, Ino pig. Sasuke wants to sit next to me. I heard Sakura squeal loudly before she was answered in an equally high-pitched and annoying voice. No way would he want to sit next to you, forehead brow. You're so ugly. I looked for Sasuke, thinking it'd be hilarious to see his face, before I realized where I was sitting. Right next to Sasuke. Aw, crap. Naruto, you idiot. Get up, Sasuke doesn't want to sit next to the likes of you. I stared at Sakura's vibrant pink hair, trying to see if it was natural or not. Even after all these years, I could not tell if her hair was real, before I snapped, shut up and find somewhere else to sit. I was here first. We were interrupted from starting a nasty brawl by Iruka-sensei. Sit down. He shouted, using his big head no jutsu. Much to my dismay, Sakura managed to squeeze into the bench next to me and was currently trying to start a conversation with Sasuke over my head. So, Sasuke, I hope we'll be on the same team, didn't you? Sasuke didn't reply, just muttered, HN. Sakura seemed to think of this as approval and squealed. Iruka announced the first few teams without trouble, and they quickly left with their Jounin senseis, who I was pleased to note were all on time. I hated waiting for people to show up, especially after this morning, when the creepy black angel had busted my door down. What if he followed me, and the Jounin wasn't there to protect me? Team 7 is Uzumaki Naruto. I straightened, hoping I got someone like Shino or Hinata on my team. They seemed pretty nice last time I talked to them. Shino and his bugs were pretty cool too, and after I told him this he seemed perfectly happy with showing me all the species. Hinata was pretty strange, as she kept turning red and fainting all the time. Was there something wrong with her? But she seemed nice when I talked to her. Haruno Sakura, we both groaned loudly. And Ichiha Sasuke. At that, I ignored Sasuke's glare and slammed a fist down on the table. The hell, sensei. Why do I have to be on a team with an emo asshole and his useless fangirl? Iruka frowned when Sakura screeched at me angrily for insulting her and her precious Sasuke, while I stared at Iruka, pleading with him to let me switch teams. I'm sorry, Naruto. These teams are decided, and in Team 7 it is traditional to put the top rookie, the dead last and the top Kunoichi on it. I slumped in my seat, defeated. Your Jounin sensei is Hada Kakashi. With that, Iruka continued on, while Shino and Hinata both gave me sympathetic glances. As the rest of the teams were called by their senseis, we waited in our seats, shuffling restlessly. I decided to take advantage of our sensei's lateness and went into a meditative position before falling backward into the darkness. Alright, what the hell is going on? I growled at the two angels in front of me, who both were looking at the ground guiltily. All of us were in front of the Kyuubi's cage, in the sewers, and the angels were just making the room look so much nicer with their brightness. Language? Mary squawked, while David cleared his throat. That angel you said had red eyes and black wings, right? Not like Ezekiel's wings, which are kind of silvery, but those wings were pitch black and were kind of like those black holes you described to me. They kind of absorbed light. I described the strange angel at my door, really hoping for some answers. David and Mary looked at each other quickly. Yes, I'm afraid we do know him. Then who is he? I frowned, trying to get some answers. Naruto, you know how Ezekiel said he was going off to fight in a war? I nodded at Mary. I can't tell you everything, but that man is one of the main powers on the other side. It looks to me like they want to capture you for some reason, but what? I couldn't answer, because the next thing I knew a fist had embedded itself into my head and it wasn't in the mindscape. Naruto, you idiot. Quit sleeping. I was so enraged at the next thing I knew I'd leapt from my seat and now had a kunai to Sakura's throat, and though I didn't know it my eyes went red. I was meditating, nosy little. I caught myself before I could finish the sentence and checked the clock. Huh. Mindscape for about 2 hours. Stowing the kunai and turning away, Sakura backed up quickly and retreated to her Sasuke, who was watching me with a curious expression on his face. Deciding to let my anger out on our late Jounin sensei, or Hada Kakashi, I grabbed a few things and fiddled with the door, setting the eraser on top to block the seal I'd put beneath it. That should teach him. I muttered, while Sakura looked like she wanted to stop me, but was remembering the little episode I'd had when she punched me and decided against it. Now I could do was wait. Ah. Where the hell is our sensei? I shrieked, finally at the limit of my patience. Wow. I lasted almost 2 minutes. What an accomplishment. Sakura looked just as annoyed as I was, finally bored with staring at Sasuke. What if he's in an emergency? He could be in trouble. Inwardly, though, she was thinking. For once, I agree with the idiot. Sasuke let out a HN, which of course no one could understand. God only knew what Sasuke was thinking, the damn social ice block. He could be plotting to kill me, or plotting to kill Sensei, or even Sakura. Or maybe all three. Yeah, definitely all three. Rolling my eyes, I dug my head into my hand and looked away, feeling slightly annoyed that my teammates were still disrespecting me. We were a team now. Didn't that count for anything? As I looked out the window, suddenly I understood why Shikamaru liked cloud watching so much. It was so peaceful, watching the clouds go by, finding the ship so puffy and fluffy and white with a black angel. Wait, what? Squinting in alarm, I leapt over to the window, ignoring Sakura's questions and Sasuke's curious stare, and balked when I saw it more clearly. The black angel that had been at my apartment door was floating there, near the clouds, staring straight at me. I shivered at his red-eyed stare, backing away slowly. Gotta get away, thought numbly, as we stared at each other. Crash. I nearly shrieked in alarm, whipping around and throwing a barrage of kunai at the door, trying to defend myself from whatever had startled me so. Then I realized it was a silver hair man, covered in glue and feathers, the kunai caught in one hand. My first impression of you three, I see, hate you. We all face-faulted while Sakura streamed out half-assed apologies. Meet me on the roof. He said, sounding bored, before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. I rolled my eyes. Show off. What were you thinking, idiot? Now he hates us. Sakura shouted at me, her fear of me fully evaporated. Huh, I kind of liked her fear. Made her leave me alone. I was thinking it would be really funny. Besides, he deserved it since he was so late. I responded, not bothering to be nice. Sometimes, well, all the time realish just pissed me off. I felt her glare on me all the way up the stairs. Normally I'd be a lot nicer, but I'd had a bad day. First, I barely got any sleep because of my goddamn wings. They responded with an annoyed flutter. Then some creepy angel shows up, apparently trying to capture me, and the day before I had my emotions tossed in a blender after failing the exams and Ezekiel leaving. I was entitled to be a little curt. Kakashi watched us with a bored expression on the quarter of the face I could see, while I cautiously looked in the direction I'd seen the black-winged angel. Seeing nothing there, I turned to see Kakashi staring curiously at where I'd been staring, and when he looked back I smiled. Why don't you three introduce yourselves? Sakura opened her mouth. Well, sensei, why don't you go first? Oh, me. Well, my name is Hada Kakashi. I have many licks and I dislike a lot of things. I have many hobbies. As for my dreamy, don't really think about that sort of thing. We all face-faulted. All we learned was his name. Pinky, go. My name, Kakashi-sensei, is Haruno Sakura. I like. Sakura paused and turned a little pink, glancing as discreetly, read. As obviously as she could at Sasuke. My hobbies are. Sakura turned even pinker and glanced at Sasuke again. My dream, she giggled quietly and darkened to a deep red, still glancing at Sasuke, who remained apathetic. And your dislikes? Kakashi prompted, sounding like he really didn't want to know. Naruto. She shouted, and I flinched. What had I ever done to her? Our poor sensei sighed loudly and gestured to me. Blondie, go. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I began, not quite sure how to go on about this. I like reading and ramen. My voice got slightly excited when I talked about my favorite food. I dislike Sasuke and his troop of fangirls, the 3 minutes it takes for ramen to cook, and people who surprise me. Kakashi chuckled at that. My hobbies are gardening and meditating. My dream, I tilted my head to think. What was my dream? To protect my precious people, of course. A long time ago, though, I'd wanted to be Hokage. Dreams change. I just want to protect my precious people for as long as I can to the best of my ability. They sat in silence for a few minutes, absorbing my words. I think they were surprised by my depth. Sakura certainly was. She looked at me with a curious expression on her face, and so did Sasuke. I couldn't quite tell about Kakashi. Alright, Emo, go. Kakashi said finally, breaking the awkward silence. My name is Sasuke. He growled through folded hands. I don't really like anything, and I dislike a lot of things. My hobby is training. And my dream is to kill a certain man. Sakura stared at Sasuke with wide eyes, before they slowly transformed into the hearts I was used to. Kakashi just sighed and shook his silver-topped head, and I felt the sudden need to break the mood into a million little pieces. I laughed. They all whipped their heads towards me, Kakashi in amusement and slight bemusement, Sakura in agitation and Sasuke in shock and annoyance. This coming from the genius of Konoha. You know, Sasuke, you're not helping with the whole fangirl thing. I actually thought you wanted to get rid of them, not encourage them. Said boy blinked his onyx eyes slowly, probably trying not to bow down to me for my awesome idea, before he looked very slowly away from the rest of us. Kakashi, I think, was the most amused, besides me, about it all, and Sakura just looked like she wanted someone to kill. Kakashi, I smiled. Now that that's over, I'm going to tell you about the Genin test. Who was going to take the bait? Sakura bit. What do you mean, sensei? I thought we already took the Genin exams. Kakashi's eye smile suddenly looked a whole lot creepier. So glad you asked, my dear Sakura. He chirped. I shivered. The genin exams were a test to weed out the weak. You're the guys that even had a chance, though I don't know how. His eye smile didn't change, but I could just feel that he was smirking as Sakura gave him an outraged look. The test tomorrow will actually show if you're worthy to become genin. Show up tomorrow at 7 o'clock sharp, don't be late. And don't eat, or you might be sick. With that he disappeared. Say, Sasuke. Do you want to have something to eat together? Now that we're teammates and all, Sakura's fading voice said as I left the roof. I was just able to catch Sasuke's HN before getting out of earshot. Sasuke walked the streets calmly, quietly and stoically, just as he had most of his life. Yes, today was a nice day, the sun was shining, the air was clear, and yet here was an uncomfortable weight hanging onto his arm that just seemed to ruin it. So, Sasuke, what do you want to do today? Sakura chirped happily, radiating pleasure simply by being in her crush's presence. Sasuke only glanced, glared at her from the corner of his eye, which for some reason she either didn't notice or didn't care. Not for the first time, Sasuke wondered if maybe she was sent by a spy of some sort and her mission was to drive him absolutely insane. If so, it was working a little more than he would have liked. Maybe when her giant crush went away he could ask her for some tips on psychological torture. Sakura smiled at Sasuke, misreading his glance. Aren't you so glad we got on the same team? Pity we got that idiot Naruto, though. Unconsciously he let out a HN in agreement. He was still slightly annoyed that the dead last got placed on a team with him, the genius. It wasn't fair at all that he would have to clean up the blonde's messes whenever he screwed up. Taking the HN as a sign to continue, Sakura began to rant. I mean, he's so annoying. A mental nod. And he has no manners. He thinks he's so much better than you, Sasuke. Can you believe that? Another mental nod. He's the worst. He'll just slow us down. A mental pause, a mental, who is this we you speak of? And a mental nod. I never see his parents either, ever. Maybe he's a delinquent and his family disowned him. That would explain a lot about him. Sasuke thought silently, still pretending to ignore Sakura. Wouldn't that be so funny? HN. He answered sullenly, still wishing he could be anywhere but right there. I didn't know he liked to garden, either. Gardening is for girls. Sakura. Yes, Sasuke. Please shut up. Okay, Sasuke. So, Sasuke. Sigh. Kakashi frowned through his mask as he examined his students' files. Sasuke and Sakura's were pretty straightforward. Sasuke was a revenge-obsessed ice cube, Sakura, a Sasuke-obsessed fashion-possessed drama queen. He really hadn't gotten the vibe smartest Kunoichi from her, but that could just be his imagination. However, he could imagine Sasuke being powerful, though Kakashi was beginning to feel like it was a bad idea to actually give the boy something to kill his brother with. The kid was mentally unstable. The person who'd surprised him the most, he mused, was probably Naruto. In his files, it had said that Naruto was stupid, had almost nothing going for him except enormous chakra reserves, and was quite prone to doing pranks on almost everyone. While it was true that Naruto didn't seem to be the brightest bolt in the box, and the chicken feathers and glue was enough to convince him of the pranking, he was still slightly confused. Naruto had created a seal, and not a simple one at that, to prank him. Either the academy was giving false reports or Naruto was hiding his skill in sealing. Of course, he might have. Kakashi sighed and tugged his hit eye back over his left eye. Looks like his troublesome blonde student was going to take some figuring out. I hummed a jaunty little tune as I watered my plants, pausing to sniff one of the flowers before moving on to the next one. Methodically making sure the soil was wet, I plucked one of the ripe tomatoes and popped it into my mouth, smiling at the taste of my efforts. Delicious, of course. The others probably hadn't understood my love of gardening, and that was okay with me. It was so peaceful, and also I don't know if it's selfish or not, but I love the feeling of creating something with my own two hands, creating a life. There was also a thrill of fear whenever I forgot to water my plants in time. I always felt like I was betraying my plants, like they'd trusted me to water them in time. The feeling of being relied on was addicting. When I finished, I pulled out a basket and began picking the ripe vegetables, noting unhappily that there weren't that many. After all, I couldn't just live off of ramen, so I often relied on my plants to make my food. Shopkeepers always overpriced the food they sold to me, so I avoided them as much as possible. Letting out a long sigh, I brought my basket to the counter and began washing the produce, wishing yet again that I had more room. This apartment was crowded, even for just one person. Glancing to see if the windows were open or not, I carefully removed my jacket to look at my wings again, and shook my head. It was still a shock to see them there. Drying off the last tomato and putting them in the fridge, I slowly extended my wings. It was still so stranger to think like that, and fluttered them, seeing just what I could move. I soon found that my wings, while I didn't have the best control over them, hurt. Whenever I slammed them into the counter a bit too hard. They hurt. Moved them funny. Hurt. Ouch. Deciding that this was a project for another day, I pushed the problem of my wings into the back of my mind and flopped onto the bed, the problem of the survival exam rearing its head. Angels were originally created as messengers of the Shinigami, made to be the soldiers of life, assisting the bringer of death with his many magnificent deeds. Indeed, angels are often sent to the earth when something does not require the Shinigami's immediate attention. One would think that angels are willing and kind creatures, however this is a misguided notion. These heavenly beings are much like people, and they do not wish the title of being the Shinigami's messenger. They often say that being an angel is much like being a glorified messenger bird. Excerpt from History of the Angels. Let it be known that Abaddon was not a patient angel. While Abaddon was over thousands of years old, had been a new angel at the time of the First Great War that did not do anything for his patience. In fact, if anything, the years had stretched his patience almost to the point of snapping entirely, but it hadn't snapped, thankfully. If it had, the hidden villages would all be toasted with blood as butter and explosions as jam. And this brat that he was supposed to be capturing was most certainly testing his thin tolerance for humans, especially half-angel humans. Abaddon hadn't been told Ezekiel was taking care of him, either. Bad enough that the Shinigami's daughter and a former general were taking care of him, but Ezekiel, too. He was so not paid enough for this job. Not that he was paid. At all. They'd have to fix that. Things were only getting more dangerous as the half-angel got stronger, get closer to being full angel, which would most certainly throw a wrench in his plans. It was just a very large stroke of luck that the child hadn't received the full powers, which would have been amplified tenfold by his tenant. They needed to get the child before his full powers came in. And when that happened, victory would never be so sweet. I rubbed my eyes blearily, watching in fascination as the words began to dance across the page, words I was supposed to be reading. As soon as Mary had figured out what I'd done, stole the extra scrolls from the vault, she'd freaked out, either from happiness or anger, I'm not sure. Anger, I could understand, but happiness. Apparently I'd found the lost history of the angels, something that had been missing for decades. So what was it doing in the old man's vaults? Even I wasn't so sure. Maybe the professor had just randomly picked the scrolls up, recognizing their rarity or something, but I sure wasn't going to ask and find out. It's too late to be reading any longer, I whined to Mary, hoping she'd answer my plea. You idiot. You read to the morning. You're going to miss the test. Get moving. She shouted back, which caused my head to jerk towards the clock. I'd read all night. Move. Mary shrieked, making my inner ears ring. I jumped out of bed, throwing History of the Angels back onto the desk and shrugging on my jacket while simultaneously grabbing an apple from my cupboard and stuffing it into my mouth. No way was I not eating. Sorry, Kakashi-sensei. I didn't pay attention when I threw open the door, so it's really no surprise I didn't sense the chakra signature right outside. Can you guess who was outside my door? If you guessed the creepy black-winged angel who wanted to capture me, you're correct. To my credit, instead of freaking out like I usually would have done, I calmly shut the door, locked it, and moseyed over to the window. There was a loud creaking noise, and I knew that the angel was testing the strength of my front door, again, so I quickly leapt out and jumped on the roof next to mine. Really, this angel was so persistent, always following me around. What was with him? Very creepy. His intimidation tactics were starting to get weak, and soon he'd be as scary as toast, never mind. Toast is very scary. My toaster oven exploded once, and I got hit in the face with it, which left a bread-sized burn on my face for a few days. Caillou-chan wouldn't heal it because he was laughing so hard. Besides toast, the angel was ceasing to freak me out. When I got where we were supposed to meet, I was greeted with the sight of a sleeping Sakura and a brooding Sasuke. They both looked like they'd gotten as much sleep as I had last night, though it was harder to tell with Sasuke with him and his stupid stoic face. Ignoring both of them, though it was very tempting to hit Sakura in a pressure point to see what would happen, I flopped onto the ground and started going over what I'd learned from the History of the Angels. So long time ago, Shinigami-sama got bored, yes, Barretto, I have to repeat myself again. And had decided that he needed to create some heavenly beings to help him with the massive workload he was dealing with. Massive workload, my asswo has enough time to create a new species. Humans were great and all, but they were puny tiny mortals who liked blowing themselves up, and frankly, while explosions were cool, it got very boring. So he picked up some mortals, let them cook in some radioactive magical goo, and overloaded them with chakra and voila angels a la mode. But that success, Shinigami-sama used the original formula to make a shortcut to make new angels, the original 7, why is it always 7? Angels were called great generals because their powers were undiluted by the shortcut. There was a lot of useless information in between, including a familiar story about a great general who got demoted because he gave a mortal woman some fountain of youth, but the most interesting thing that happened next was the first great angel war. See, one of the great generals got tired with just being second best and attacked Shinigami-sama for the top spot. The other generals defended their leader, 2 died in the first attack, and the angel was forced to retreat where he gathered a bunch of other angels who supported his cause and bided his time for a year or two. Then, he attacked the Shinigami-sama mercilessly. It looked like a standstill, but then, the other angel raised some hellhounds and the like from the underworld, promising freedom, and sent them to attack along with the armies. This was called the last battle of the First Great War, and the tide was slowly turning in the enemy angel's favor. For a while it looked like Shinigami-sama and his army would lose. Even the great god himself was in the front lines, hacking away at those bad boys. When they were finally backed into a corner and all hope was lost, of course, Shinigami-sama pulled some incredible trump card that killed the other army in one fell swoop. No one knows exactly what the trump card is, and no one was brave enough to ask. The ones who'd survived fled to the underworld, where they stayed until the Second Great War. I haven't gotten to that part yet. It was getting boring just sitting here doing nothing, so I decided to go exploring. I got up from my position at the base of the tree, Uchna to self, trees are uncomfortable. I brushed myself off and began to nose around the place we were meeting. It was a clearing like any other, except for the fact it had 3 stumps or logs or whatever sticking out of the ground, surrounded by overgrown grass. It didn't look like it was used much, if at all. There were no telltale signs of a person training with Kikakyu, no little holes where kunai had entered the ground. Was this place abandoned for a reason? Either it was taken care of very well or no one used it. There were lots of trees in the area, and the training area was pretty big, so there were lots of places to hit and put traps. If I played my cards carefully, I could set up something here that would catch Kakashi-sensei off guard. That is, if the situation called for it. I cracked my knuckles and pulled out some ninja wire. Time to get to work. When Kakashi arrived knew what he expected, Sakura leaping up and shouting, "You're late." Sasuke giving him a typical Uchiha glare, the kind that could freeze volcanoes, and Naruto sleeping or something along those lines. He was mostly correct. Sakura leapt up from where she'd been playing idly with her hair and shrieked, "You're late." And Sasuke had given him the glare. But where was his little blonde student? "Good morning. Where's Naruto?" he asked, oozing boredom. Sakura calmed down momentarily to insult her comrade. "I don't know. I didn't see him come, that little idiot. If he gets us all in trouble, I swear she was halfway through a speech about just what she was going to do to me if I didn't show up when I showed up." "Hey," I said, pulling a spider from my hair as I clambered out of the trees. "Sorry. It's pretty easy to get lost in there. Not to mention I'd been dodging all the traps I'd set up, but that was beside the point." "Glad you could join us," Sensei said, giving me an eye smile. Then, he plunked down a clock and pushed a little button. "Now it's set to noon." "Okay, what?" Noting our confusion, Kakashi I smiled deeper. "Here are 2 bells. Your task is to take these from me before noon. Those who don't get a bell by noon pause for dramatic effect get no lunch. I won't just tie you to these stumps. I'll eat my lunch in front of you." Simultaneous thoughts. So that's why he told us not to eat. Ah, well. I had an apple, so I'll be okay think. You only need to get 1 bell. There are only 2, so one of you will definitely be tied to a stump. His tone grew darker as he spoke. "And if you don't get a bell, you fail, which means one of you will go back to the academy." The wind blew eerily as the silence pronounced those ominous words, and I felt that I was standing on a barren plain, very alone, just as I had been years ago. My teammates were my enemies. No, would Kakashi make us distance ourselves from each other like this? Was he doing this on purpose? May require some thought. I blinked to attention when Kakashi continued. "You can even use your shuriken. You won't succeed unless you come at me with the intent to kill." At this I chuckled, which made the others look at me funny, so I elaborated. "Kakashi-sensei, you force us not to eat, you tell us we'll fail if we don't get the bells from you, and you expect us not to attack you with the intent to kill." I chuckled again and shook my head. "Really, I thought you smarter than that. You're not a very good jounin, are you?" "I hate to say this, sensei, but for once I agree with the idiot. There are 3 of us and one of you'll get hurt." I was mildly surprised when she agreed with me, but shook it off. Really, thought her agreeing with me was pretty creepy. "I'll let you be the judge of that," our sensei said, which put me on edge. I was being much too happy about this. "Now when I say start, you start. When the timer rings, you stop. Everyone understands? Good. Now start." He was just sitting there, reading his weird little book. As soon as we dashed into the trees, he'd rummaged in his kunai pouch a bit. I thought he might bring out some super secret weapon before pulling out a book. An orange book. I formed a cross seal, staring out at Kakashi-sensei with an incredulous look on my face. Isn't he going to take us seriously? My newly formed cage bunshin sent me a quiet glare. Why am I the one who has to do this? He complained softly, voice barely rising above a hiss. Because if I'm hit then we're screwed. The cage Bunshin thankfully saw the wisdom in that and nodded his head minutely. Got it, boss. Then he melted into the trees, taking off. Okay. I thought, sitting cross-legged on the ground and shutting one eye, keeping the other eye on Sensei, pressing my stick-straight finger pads together. I'd actually based the pose off of Nara Shikamaru's thinking pose whenever he got into a spot of trouble in Shogi. I'd played him a couple times and had seen the pose only once or twice, however once he finished thinking, he'd come up with a brilliant move I hadn't thought possible. When I tried a pose that was similar to his, I found it helped me clear my thoughts. There's got to be some hidden motive to this, that's what Caillou-sensei always said. What do I know? He told us not to eat, which was kind of stupid, it only made us more mad at him and it left us without energy. I'm certain he didn't just make us not eat for the energy. So why would he want us snappish? Then there are the bells. What's with those? It's almost as though he wants us to fight each author but we're supposed to get the bells from him. Speaking of that, how strong is he, really? I know we're really weak, but if he thinks he can take on 3 of us at one time he's a little. Wait. That's it. We're supposed to all take him on at one time. Lacedian work. He made us not eat so we'd be moody, lessening the chances of us working together. Also, he used the 2 bells to pit us against each other even further when we're only supposed to work together. Genius, Kakashi-sensei. I grinned triumphantly and pulled out of my thinking pose, just as my clone sent the kunai out at Kakashi-sensei. See, I'd been wondering if he could still see us when he was reading and had sent a clone out to test this. That way, my position wouldn't be revealed and if he went after the clone, it would give me more time to think up a plan. What I didn't expect was for Kakashi-sensei to actually catch my clone's kunai and throw it back at the clone, effectively dispelling him. Teeny swear, this creeps me out. Looked up, straight at where I was hiding. How did he spot me? I thought, sitting stock still. He's a jounin, you idiot. Nearly leaping up at the sound of Mary's voice, I managed to control myself. Mary, you'll never believe how glad I am to hear you. Yeah, brat. This time it was David. Good job for figuring it out. Mary was so proud of you. I sent them a mental image of me beaming widely, which made David laugh. Hey, Naru-chan. Oh. Mary never used that tone or that nickname unless she really wanted something. Please use Tengoku no Bunshin. Ah, I should have expected. A while ago, Mary, David and Caillou-chan had come up with a special technique called Tengoku no Bunshin, basically meaning heavenly Bunshin. It created a clone, but not of myself, it was literally a clone of Mary or David themselves, it even had their wings down to a T. That wasn't the best part of the Bunshin, the best part was that it transferred Mary and David's consciences into the clone. However, the clones weren't as powerful as the real things, though they were still very strong. Fine. You guys can be a distraction while I go find Sakura and Sasuke. I let out a soft breath and ran through the series of seals necessary for the clones. The reason I was so reluctant to use them, though, was the fact that it took so much chakra from me it was almost scary. Tengoku no Bunshin. I breathed, and then, standing in front of me in all their glory was Mary and David, glowing brilliantly and basically just looking angelic. Kakashi looked up and snapped his book shut, staring at the angels with an incredulous expression on his face. David turned and smirked at me before the 2 of them disappeared in a flash of light and were suddenly next to Kakashi, attacking him with incredible strength. That'll keep him busy for a while. I thought, sneaking away as Sensei reached for his hit I ate, barely able to dodge the angels' furious attacks. Now, if I were a Sakura and a Sasuke, where would I hide? Come out, wherever you are. The Baden nearly jumped out of his skin when Mary and David appeared out of nowhere and began attacking the target Sensei. They glowed with their heavenly energy, flashes of white light attacking a small gray figure. He knew exactly why Mary and David were placed with Ezekiel to protect the vessel. Well, they argued all the time and were generally considered to be unable to work together. Anyone who'd seen them fight together would know differently, they were a machine. They were 2 gears, perfectly oiled, that fit together flawlessly, that turned the whole contraption and made it do amazing things. He watched as Mary did an uppercut, and when the sensei leaned backwards, David came from beneath, fist poised to the back of his Heath sensei twisted to the side at the last minute, but still got clipped, and Mary spread her wings and flapped over the gray hair, landing on her hands and flipping onto her feet, as David twisted and went for the sensei's legs. Who barely managed to replace himself with a log before it got smashed to pieces, but Mary was ready for the Kawamari. She went for a kick to the family jewels, and when he dodged, David came and went for his neck. It was breathtaking to watch the 2 fight. He could tell that the puny mortal of a sensei was tiring quickly, even with Raphael's gift implanted in his left eye. What a waste. Abaddon sneered to himself, watching the eye spin and dance in an attempt to keep up with the 2 heavenly beings. Raphael did not leave to have his gift planted into some trash. That's when he noticed something strange about the two angels, their glow was softer than when he'd seen them last. Have they gotten weaker since being in the brat's head? He wondered, narrowing his eyes. No, impossible, 12 years of inactivity would not even dent their skills. So what? Oh. His eyes widened. Oh. Oh, shit. The Baden didn't like swearing. He didn't care for swearing. Swearing was for human rabble, he often said. But now was a very, very, very good time to swear. Umwit. I stared at Sasuke's head. Just his head. He'd been buried up to his head. Somehow, that was much funnier than I thought it would be. Sasuke sent me his signature glare as I laughed, which only made me laugh harder because it was so much less effective when he was blushing and buried neck deep in the ground. I think I may have had an epileptic fit when I noticed Sakura not a few feet away, passed out, foaming slightly at the mouth. Just shut up and get me out. Ah, he'd had enough of me. I knew what I had to say, but couldn't quite get it out because of my laughter. I rubbed a tear from my eye, still grinning. And no, Sasuke team. What? He growled, staring at me incredulously. Let me out. And no, I let out another chuckle, gasping for breath. Cause this is the only chance I'm going to have to talk to you. Now he was surprised, though his cool Uchiha exterior didn't reveal anything, and he looked away, gritting his teeth angrily. I don't have anything to say to you. Use that famous Uchiha brain, idiot. I poked his forehead, and though I didn't know it at the time, I'd stirred up the memories of a certain psychotic Uchiha brother and grinned, showing my foxy teeth. He told us not to eat to make us irritable, and he used just 2 bells to pit us against each other. And really, has there ever been a 2-man team before? Besides, no genin can take on a jounin by ourselves. It's like he wants us to fight. So what is the point of this test? Huh, Sasuke. At first I think he was going to ignore me and be a hard-headed idiot, but then his eyes lit up with realization. Teamwork. He breathed, before looking away quickly at his show of emotion. Yup. And unfortunately, we'll need Sakura, too. At this, we both looked at the unconscious girl, and grimaced. Page Bunshin. I murmured, forming the seals, and 3 clones appeared. I pointed to the first one. Wake up, Sakura. Before the clone could complain, I pointed to the other clones. You too, help me dig up Sasuke. As we began to work at the earth around Sasuke, he looked curiously at my clones. What are those? He asked, furrowing his eyebrows. He's asking me? I thought, giving Sasuke a sideways glance. Whatever happened to Uchiha pride? They're Kage Bunshin, shadow clones. It wouldn't hurt to tell him. They're solid, see? I poked one of them in the side, and it let out a hiss. They take a lot of chakra, though. As I found the top of Sasuke's shoulders, his eyes lit up with something akin to excitement. You have to teach me that jutsu. Ah, of course. But maybe it would be beneficial to start an alliance with the Ice Prince. Only if you agree to teach me Gakakyu. I held out a hand, smiling quietly, as the other clones dug up his arms. He looked at me, then at me hand, then back at me, before smirking and leaning forward slightly to grasp it. We have a deal, dope. Metatron let out a long, drawn-out sigh, and pressed his face into his pearly white desk. Seraphiel, dressed in light body armor, sat next to him, idly picking at some food that had found its way onto his wing. I'm so bored. Metatron whined to his bodyguard. The naturally silent and stoic angel who'd been assigned to the idiot gave him a long sideways look before going back to ignoring him. Unperturbed, the almighty secretary continued to. Celestial scribe Shinigami-sama said. That's what he told me. He told me I was important. And you know what he told me my job was? I could have been writing down history, like Kiraman and Kataban. I could have been the librarian, like Pahalaya. But no, instead I get to spend an eternity in heaven as the damned secretary. At this, Seraphiel, quick as lightning, flicked his wrist. A fraction of a second later, a gleaming silver blade buried itself inches from Metatron's prone head. Ah. The secretary yelped and leaped back, wings instinctively pressing around him in a comforting barrier. What was that for? Seraphiel was quiet for a few seconds, stoically extracting his blade from the desk, before he let out a low, simple growl. You're annoying. Metatron let out another long, drawn-out sigh. I thought we were friends. He complained and lowered himself back to the desk. Shinigami-sama put you up to this, didn't he? There were a few moments of blessed silence, in which Seraphiel let out a soft, relieved sigh, and continued to play with his wing feathers. It lasted only a minute. I miss Gabriel. He appreciated me. Seraphiel slammed down his fist, drew his short sword from his belt, and lunged for Metatron's throat. The whirlwind of feathers plunged through the doors and landed on the floor, giving the 2 quarreling angels a heart attack. A second later Seraphiel drew his broadsword, glowing white with celestial energy, and sheathed his short sword. With little effort he leapt onto the desk in front of Metatron before flipping off and landing in a battle-ready position in front of the writhing mass of feathers. Metatron reeled back and pulled a small black dagger from his sleeve in case the intruder managed to get past Seraphiel, before tugging a piece of parchment from the confines of his desk and pulling a long glowing feather from his wing. He made a quick scratch on the paper with the feather, it left a golden streak behind and settled so he could still see the battle. He was, after all, a celestial scribe. He had to record what happened, screw Keetaman and Kiribin. The writhing mass of feathers settled, leaving bronze wisps floating aimlessly around the room. The mass of feathers on the ground was breathing heavily on the ground and it looked awfully familiar. "Gabriel!" Metatron shouted, leaping over the desk. "Thank heavens you're okay." Gabriel, who had until recently been on the front lines of the battlefield, flopped onto his back, in pain. A long scar stretched from his shoulder to his thigh, though it was already healing. All in all, Gabriel looked worse for wear. "The message Edo Shinigami-sama," he gasped out, then winced and rolled over. "Urgent, help me up, Metatron Seraphiel." The two angels instantly complied, taking his powerful, muscled arms in their own and lifting him to his feet, letting him lean on them. It was no mean feat, Gabriel was very big and strong. "Thank you," he smiled, eyes half closed. "What's the message, Gabriel?" Metatron prodded, earning a look from Seraphiel. "News from Ezekiel." Gabriel bent over, curly golden head shaking slightly. "Abaddon has targeted the Prime." "No." Seraphiel nearly dropped the messenger. For a moment, Metatron and his spindly arms struggled to hold Gabriel up before Seraphiel quickly helped him. "But what about David and Mary? And Ezekiel? Shouldn't they be able to protect him?" "Ezekiel is needed on the front lines," Gabriel said cryptically, eyeing Seraphiel steadily. "David and Mary are not as strong because they are in the minefield of the Prime. They have been discussing a plan with." Gabriel trailed off and shook his head. "It's a very dangerous time. More and more angels are being taken as POWs." "Who?" Metatron asked, though he was more curious about who Mary and David were discussing the plan with. "Who has been captured so far?" "Mostly just soldiers, none of the 7, none of their helpers. Thankfully." There was a very sad note in his voice as he spoke. After all, no soldiers being captured are better than any at all. "How is the war going?" There was just a hint of fear in Metatron's eyes. The cowardly secretary hated even the thought of battle. Gabriel's earthly green eyes were distant and old. "It is a battle of two great powers. At the time there is no thought on who will be the victor. Just bloodshed. So what do we do?" Sakura had immediately dispersed my clone with a fist to the face, which that had to hurt, and was now sobbing loudly on Sasuke-kun, wailing something about blood, death, and a head. She was most likely put under a genjutsu after all. Sasuke was alive and unharmed. Anyway, with a new ally like Sasuke, it would be so easy to get Sakura to work with use and claim those stupid bells. With Sasuke's brain, my clones and Sakura's whatever were certain to win. Sasuke twitched at my question before bending down and tracing some lines in the dirt. In the end, all I saw were a bunch of squiggly lines and X, but Sakura was crooning to him about his incredible art skills. I tilted my head to the side, then switched sides, but still could not figure out what on earth he'd drawn. "Right, Sasuke, what is this?" "Baka. It's..." Sakura finally stopped fawning over Sasuke and looked at the drawing. "It's Sasuke, what is it?" She did not appear in the least bit embarrassed. "Girls are so weird." "It's a battle plan, idiots." Sasuke gritted his teeth. I chuckled. "We could plant traps here," he pointed toward the little dots. "While Kakashi is distracted, we could confuse him with a genjutsu," he indicated the little X. "And Naruto, you could overwhelm Kakashi with your clones while he's caught." He leaned back, smirking in triumph, obviously thinking that his battle plan was infallible. I stared hard at the plan. Nope, still not seeing it. At his annoyed stare, I shrugged. "No, I mean I got the plan, but the drawings you have terrible art skills." Cue Sakura's loud shrieking. I twisted a finger in my ear and wrinkled my nose. "Sasuke, make her shut up." Sasuke gave me an incredulous stare, and it took me a moment to realize that A, just because we were allies, didn't mean we were buddy-buddy all of a sudden, and B, every second Sakura screamed at me was another second she wasn't paying attention to him. After a few seconds, Sasuke got tired of Sakura shrieking at me. "Sakura, you know genjutsu, right?" The Pincat stopped shouting and glanced at Sasuke. "Yeah, I guess it's not very good, though." "It'll be good enough." I interjected, smiling to soften my words. "I can get Kakashi-sensei over. You better be ready by then." I ran off, leaving my two teammates behind me. Meanwhile, Kakashi was seriously freaked out. One minute he'd been enjoying his book, keeping an eye on Naruto, sending clones to chase after the other genin, when two winged beings had jumped out of the bushes and started attacking him. And not only that, but the only person who was close by was Naruto, so either they had come from him or they were spies. Either way, it was bad news. Thankfully, they were slowing down. The bad thing? He was slowing down too. Now that he looked at the two of them, he realized that he was actually faster. It was just the pair's strategy. Their complete trust in one another was what made them so hard to fight. The male angel clipped him in the shoulder, and the force was so great Kakashi span around and hit the dirt and had to roll away as the female landed where his head had been. Then she paused, looking over the tops of the trees, as though listening for something, though Kakashi could not hear it. After a few seconds, she nodded, turned to her partner and blinked to him. He blinked back. And suddenly Kakashi was flying through the air, though he hadn't seen either of them move. The wind blew past him with such ferocity that his hair whipped wildly at his face, stinging where it hit. Trees flew by him, some missing him only by inches. After a moment of shock, Kakashi curled into a ball, spun once, then landed in a crouch on the ground, alert and ready for any attack. The strange beings had been playing with him. They were obviously more volatile than he'd originally thought. He took a step back to hide in the trees, only to jerk forward when his foot hit a tripwire. Unfortunately for him, it was too late to back out. His world exploded, and he only just managed to dodge the giant fireball that detonated in his face. I have to admit, that was probably the highlight of my day. Sakura, who'd been standing nervously in the trees, all the while marveling at Sasuke's incredible trap making, quickly realized that now was the best time to cast her Jinjutsu. She hurriedly weaved the chakra, watching her teacher with weary eyes. The Jinjutsu was light, it was simple, it wouldn't have slowed an alert, experienced Jounin at all. However, this Jounin was slightly disoriented from the fireball, and still shocked with the strange clone spies whatever the hell they were. The Jinjutsu took hold, and I took advantage of this by creating dozens of clones and sending them to converge on his future sensei. Well done, all of you. Kakashi smiled at them, which caused one student to cheer, one to smirk, and one to grin widely. Can you guess which one of us was who? However, there were still some flaws. I flinched, knowing that we were probably about to get a major lecture. Sakura, we'll start with you. Sakura, on my left, flinched as though knowing what was coming. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Your performance was a little disappointing, considering your academy grades. First of all, you did nothing to assess the challenge, you were much more focused on other things. Kakashi eyed Sasuke, who looked like he was going to cringe, but just managed not to. You made no attempt to take the bells at all. You just went looking for Sasuke. Did it even occur to you to think of Naruto? She hesitated and then shook her head shamefully. You were so panicked when you saw Sasuke injured, you fainted, which is very unbefitting of a kunoichi. However, in the beginning you showed some skills in stealth, and in the end, you did help out your teammates, though it was only because Sasuke told you to. You also showed some skill in the Jinjutsu area. Kakashi nodded and sighed. Her performance was the most disappointing of the three genin. Rin was probably rolling in her grave that a girl like this had ever attempted to be a ninja. Though his former teammate was a fangirl, at least she knew something. Next, we'll go on to Sasuke. Kakashi addressed the black-haired Uchiha on my right. Bastard had decided that since we had a partnership now, I could protect him from Sakura. Their performance was as expected. You did not care about your teammates at all in the beginning. You thought of them as nuisances that would get in your way, and instead tried to fight me one-on-one. It never occurred to you that I was a Jounin, and that it was pretty much impossible for you to beat me. Sasuke didn't say anything, just glared. Typical Uchiha response. However, you did show some skill in trapping and Taijutsu. You nearly got the bells, but nearly isn't good enough. Did you even consider teamwork? Is Naruto going to think for you every time? Sasuke let out an indignant snarl. In the end, though, you did come up with a viable plan to get the bells, and even formed a makeshift alliance. Kakashi added the last part as an afterthought. Good work. Sasuke's chest swelled up like a balloon with pride. I grinned over at him, and when he caught my eye he blinked, and his lip twitched. Oh my god, did Sasuke nearly just smile? I thought, shocked. Then, I shook my head. No way. Naruto. I jumped to attention. Sir. I like that reaction. Kakashi smiled at me, while I blushed furiously. It wasn't my fault that before I'd come to the academy I'd gone to a military boarding school. Right. I should probably explain that. See, when I was younger 5 or 6 or so I tried to go the academy. However, there were so many complaints, so many children being taken out because of me, that Gigi had to take me out. Instead, he sent me to a military boarding school in a little town in Fire Country until I was 8, and then I came back to be a ninja. I was actually pretty proficient in military tactics and self-defense and could also fly an airplane, which I have to admit is pretty freaking cool. Not as cool as flying, though, you know, real flying. Naruto, I have to say your performance was the most unexpected in a good way. The first thing you did was assess the surroundings and set up multiple traps in the forest. I didn't expect it, so I spent a few minutes dodging your clever little tricks. However, I know for a fact that Sakura and Sasuke spent a bit dodging them. This tired out your teammates. He gave me a pointed look. When you first began the task, you did something that was unexpected of the dead last. You sat down and thought about the challenge. Then, you tested out whether or not I could still react while I was reading my book. Kakashi chuckled while I shivered. My poor clone. You then made several clones to keep me distracted while you went to go find your teammates. The sentence was matter of fact, but I knew that he was just buzzing to know what the hell they were. When you did find them, you managed to get Sasuke to listen to you, which you knew was the key to getting Sakura to listen. Kakashi I smiled at me, and my eyes widened in shock and happiness. Good job, Naruto. Good job. He said good job. My grin widened exponentially, and I knew that inwardly I was throwing a party in my head. Most likely David and Mary would throw one for me. That was just the way they were. Then, when I realized that a certain Uchiha was leaving, an idea sparked in my mind. Oi, Sasuke. Sasuke turned around, looking as stoic as usual, though there was still a note of disdain in his eyes. What? Why don't you and I grab a lunch? I grinned. We can discuss our trade agreement there. For a second it looked like he was going to refuse, then, he nodded slightly. Just before I left, Kakashi called out, and by the way, Naruto, you and I are going to have a little talk tomorrow. Later that night, I lay on my bed, wings stretched out to take advantage of the privacy. Keeping them wrapped up was annoying. They were starting to get sore, lazily swinging my feet back and forth. On the pillow in front of me lay the history of the angels, the golden words glittering on the page. This time, I was reading about the generals. The original 7 generals were human once, however, after they were bathed in a mysterious concoction, they found themselves with wings and immortality. The firstborn angel, Ezekiel, was the Shinigami's assassin. He could easily blend into the background and strike with the speed of light. Humans often consider Ezekiel as the symbol for darkness. The second-born, Michelangelo, was the general of Shinigami's great army. He was highly skilled in battle tactics and could fight like a demon. Many generals pray to him for luck before entering a battle. Lucifer, the third oldest, was the Shinigami's advisor. He was highly intelligent and looked at life realistically. Before the First Great War, Lucifer was often portrayed as a scholar, and because his name means morning star, he was often thought of as the star in the morning. The fourth oldest, Raphael, was the Shinigami's healer. He was extremely proficient in medicine and could heal almost anything. Raphael's caduceus was considered the symbol for healing, and many doctors begged him for luck during dangerous times. Azrael, the fifth oldest, was the angel of death. When humans were about to die, he appeared to them in a golden light and carried their souls to the afterlife. Azrael was the bright light humans saw before dying. The sixth oldest, Gabriel, was the Shinigami's messenger. He was exceptionally quick and could cover hundreds of miles in just a second. Gabriel is often mistaken for a comet or a meteor. David, the youngest, was the angel of love. He was a romantic who enjoyed creating soulmates and preached the wonders of true love. Due to his short stature, David is often thought of as a cherub, though he doesn't carry a bow and never goes around. Everything changed when Lucifer turned. He got greedy, seeing all the power of the Shinigami all the time. He converted a small band of lesser angels and attacked the Shinigami. He struck down Azrael, and as Raphael was going to heal him, he struck down his younger brother as well. After the attack, Azrael and Raphael went down to Earth to take forms Tubi and Bloodlines, respectively. What? I blinked, staring at the page. Oi, Mary. David. What does this mean? I felt their presence come forward, and I directed their attention to the bit about Azrael and Raphael going to take forms. There was a momentary pause. Oh, well. David began, perhaps a bit awkwardly. Well, angels are immortal, right? I nodded. So what happens when we die? Ooh. I hadn't considered that. Well, we go down to Earth and take forms. Super powerful earthly forms. So Raphael actually created the first bloodlines. This was hurting my brain. Yes. Mary butted in. Your sensei had one of Raphael's gifts. He used it well, for one not of that bloodline. Right. Okay, too much info. And what's the Jubi? The 10 tails. There was another, more prominent pause, and then they both responded simultaneously. Classified information. That's enough for tonight, don't you think? Mary said, obviously trying to direct my attention away from whatever the Jubi was. Big day tomorrow. First flying lesson. Get some sleep, you were going to need it. I frowned, sighed, and put the book under my pillow. Night, Mary, David. Night, Naruto. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Silver Writing Bug for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.